And we have one last presentation from Ms. Maureen Elias. Maureen serves as the Assistant Director of the Veterans Health Council of Vietnam Veterans of America, and she has a master's in mental health counseling from Bowie State University.
I need to tell you, I have actively been seeking ways to kill myself. First thing out of her mouth, it was my first day as a brand new mental health counseling intern at the Crisis Stabilization Center, and I had just launched into full-blown panic mode. My first day, and they have thrown me to the wolves. I am in way over my head. All I knew were statistics about suicide. I've never faced someone contemplating suicide. I didn't even know what to say. I have never even had a friend come to me and confide they were thinking about suicide. What do I say to this total stranger? None of my schooling in mental health counseling had prepared me for this conversation. I was completely at a loss for words. Once I regained the ability to breathe, I said as calmly as I could, "I'm so glad you came to me with these feelings. You sound like you are in a lot of pain." She opened up and poured everything out, and so we both survived my first day at the Crisis Stabilization Center. Through my direct experience, I learned that there are many false myths around suicide. As a society, we don't like to talk about it, and therefore we don't understand it, which makes it harder to solve. The numbers are rising. We have to take action because it is becoming a bigger problem. The fact that we are all here in this room together now means that we have gotten past our rock bottom moments. We haven't acted upon those feelings. But we have all experienced at least a moment in time where we either feel like I am messing up so much I should just stop, or wishing the ground would swallow us whole. For most of us, we feel we belong and don't perceive ourselves to be a burden, so we are able to carry on. This is not so for those contemplating suicide. Sadly, they struggle with the perception that they are a burden and no longer feel a sense of belonging. In Tom Joyner's book, Myths About Suicide, he peels off the blindfold and cracks open some of the more pervasive myths around suicide. I'm about to debunk 4 commonly held myths about suicide. And before I do, I'd like to propose a challenge for you. I'd like you to listen and count, honestly, how many of these you knew to be false before I debunked them. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask for your number. I just want you to keep track. They are myths for a reason. They are well known. The majority of people think these are true rather than false. The majority of even the smartest people in this room might be getting this wrong. I want to keep you in the know as you are on the cutting edge of information, and really, being able to help a situation is to understand it properly, which is what my organization is all about. Now, let's get to the 4 myths. Myth 1, suicide is an easy escape, one that cowards use. When I served in the Army, at almost every quarterly safety briefing, there was some poor schmuck who'd been selected for the suicide prevention training who would get up and yell, "Suicide is a coward's way of getting out of his responsibilities, so don't friggin' kill yourself, okay?" Only he didn't say friggin'. That's not very helpful, I thought to myself, and maybe it's wrong. If suicide is so easy, then why is it so difficult to do? The current ratio stands that for every 20 suicide attempts, 1 is completed. I don't think any of us would consider those who won the Tour de France cowards, and yet, of those 60 who have won the Tour de France, suicide occurs at a rate several hundred times higher than the general population. And I doubt any of us would consider the survivors of the Holocaust cowards, and the suicide rate among those survivors is the highest in human history. What these 2 populations do have in common, though, along with many veterans, is a shared history of experience with injury and pain that creates familiarity with fearlessness, which can prove fatal when combined with a desire for death. Myth 2, most people who die by suicide don't make future plans. This one surprised me. I would think that one of the plus sides of knowing my life was about to end is that I wouldn't have to worry about things like paying the electric bills. I think I would probably tell my boss off. Not you, sir. You're great. You're wonderful. Someone in the past, a past boss. I wouldn't waste my time or money. I would have some fun. But individuals thinking about suicide treat responsibility like they normally do, because they are handling their everyday stuff while having much deeper, painful thoughts. The suicidal mind is ambiguous, with competing forces tugging at the suicidal individual from the sides of both life and death. People often make plans for jobs, trips, and relationships in the weeks before their deaths by suicide. There are two processes in their mind going on. The mundane that is going on in virtually everyone's mind, such as, what will I do this weekend? What do I need from the grocery store? Why won't this printer work? The other side, far from mundane, is difficult for those who do not struggle with suicidal thoughts to conceive of. Why don't I just die? There is an aspect of death that is almost comforting. People would be better off, so why don't I just get it over with? Myth 3. Suicide is selfish. Those who die by suicide have experienced a rupture in their social connections. They are alone in a way that few can fathom. In fact, there is an abundance of evidence that those who die by suicide believe incorrectly that their deaths will be a blessing to others. In their minds, the mental calculations tell them their death will be worth more than their life to others. Their minds are so focused on the here and now, on their pain, that even the most obvious consequences of their actions do not register. Let me give you an example. As I was in labor with my first child, begging for an epidural, the anesthesiologist was busy with another client down the hall, and my first true 100% contraction hit. Without even realizing what I was doing, I grabbed my beloved husband by his t-shirt, pulled him close to me, and bit him until my teeth touched. It wasn't an act of selfishness. I wasn't even trying to hurt him. Well, not really. I was just in such immense pain, I reacted, maybe overreacted. In later, heated discussions with my husband over this particular reaction of mine, I attributed it to something like the desperation caused by the pain, which he should understand, right? Perhaps we, too, can envision those with suicidal thoughts as someone who is in immense pain, rather than someone who is selfish. And myth 4, if people want to die by suicide, we can't stop them. Can you believe that one? The really scary thing about people believing this myth to be true is that they might not try to intervene, to take action at all, thinking it won't make a difference anyway, as they will just attempt suicide at another time and place. Imagine if this were a loved one who had had a heart attack or a stroke, and the policy were not to intervene because they would probably just have another one. In fact, the opposite is true. Intervention can be very effective at stopping or preventing suicide attempts. At various places that have been super lethal to jump from, places such as the Eiffel Tower, the Golden Gate Bridge, or the Empire State Building, authorities put measures into place to help prevent further deaths by suicide. Measures as simple as a gate or suicide prevention watch volunteers are effective, because most of the people who are stopped from jumping at these locations don't go on to die by suicide somewhere else. If the myth were true, those who were thwarted would merely find another place or means of jumping to their death. Okay, you've heard 4 common myths about suicide. Now I challenge you to keep track of your number. If you knew all 4 of these myths were false before I debunked them, you almost have superpowers. If you knew none of these were true, it's okay. Neither did I the day someone told me they were considering suicide. And that is why I'm here to help. These aren't the only myths out there, and I encourage you to look inside yourself and find some of the myths you might hold regarding suicide and question them. I would also like to take this opportunity to encourage the DoD, VA, and other healthcare providers to take a closer look at the entirety of the situation surrounding when a veteran dies by suicide, by stepping up efforts to conduct thorough post-mortem biopsychosocial evaluations from the veteran's loved ones, friends, and family members. What major life changes have occurred leading up to their death? Had they lost their job? Had there been a change in the family, such as the birth of a child, or a child has moved out? By looking at the whole picture, we can suss out the information, find the commonalities, and better communicate and reduce the factors that cause the perception that they are a burden or felt they did not belong. One example of this might be veteran employment. A lot of energy is focused on lowering the veteran unemployment rate, which right now is at an all-time low. So the unemployment rate has gone down, but the suicide numbers haven't really changed. What is missing here? What are we doing wrong? If just having a job were enough, why aren't the numbers changing? There are other things at work. This biopsychosocial would help us find what is still at play. How much effort is being placed into ensuring the employment is meaningful, gainful work? Or how many were underemployed? In a recent article by Natalie Gross in the Military Times, I shared my experience leaving the Army. I was a counterintelligence agent with a top secret clearance, fluent in Korean. When I utilized the VA Career Services, do you know what job I was told my skills qualified me for? An administrative assistant. You mean like a secretary? Could you check that again? I'm not sure how my lie detection skills or rapid rapport building or language is going to really help me as an administrative assistant. Maybe if I worked for the president. Thanks for such excellent advice, VA Career Counselor. This made me wonder. So our employment numbers are up, but is that number high because veterans are in soul-crushing or dead-end meaningless jobs? Which raises the question, how many veterans who died by suicide were meaningfully and gainfully employed? When we look to the life of a veteran who has died by suicide, perhaps we find they have lost their job. Their income stream has stopped. The veteran has begun acting out at home and turns to alcohol and drugs. Their spouse has decided they have had enough and has taken the kids and left. The house gets foreclosed upon and the veteran moves either to a shelter, their car, or the streets. The veteran has now lost their sense of belonging and perceives himself a burden, and the risk skyrockets. The VA has a mortgage guarantee program. They can tell when a veteran has fallen into arrears on their mortgage. I don't know if you have experienced this yourselves, but take it from me. Falling behind on your mortgage payment, even if for a month, is terrifying. It's scary. So this is an ideal time to reach out to someone, find out what is going on, and intervene. It might be possible for the mortgage program and the VHA to combine efforts to catch things before they spiral any further. By conducting thorough biopsychosocial interviews with those who interacted with the veteran who died by suicide, we could better find what things accumulate to the point where a veteran perceives himself a burden and no longer has a sense of belonging. Then we might really begin to make an impactful difference. Don't fall for the myths. Our efforts can really make a big difference. Thank you.